Because they're liars. Because what I was saying before you got on air was that if scientists were sincere and they actually wanted to do science and not propaganda, here's what they would do. They would be protecting people from industry. Mm-hmm. That's all they would do. All they would do is they would be saying things like, don't eat this, don't eat that, there's no way that this should be a marketed product, this is poisonous, screw the polio virus, we're spraying DDT on people through the 1940s, 50s, 60s. Give me a break.
Right.
Screw it. We're spraying organochlorine neurotoxic chemicals on people. Never mind. Don't stop worrying about a little particle that comes out in poop and doesn't cause anything that you can focus on the stuff that we know kills the nervous system. But scientists lie. They lie through their teeth because they're slaves to the petrol. They're slaves to what everybody else is a slave to. They're slave to the petrol oligarchy.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, they're all interconnected into government. I mean, that's what, the military-industrial complex is, the medical-industrial complex, whatever you want to call it. It's like all parts of the military, the government, corporations, and then all of those people working for the petrol, petrochemical, they're all slaves to that because that's what we're dependent on.
We're going to spend the second hour of the show just going through a few of the wonderful things that science has given us. Now, I want to be clear. Science is the same thing as the medieval church with oil, with machines. Same people.
Yeah. No, I thought that was a good analogy that you brought up when you talked about science. You did that video where you compared science to like the religious sacrifices. Because I always compared the Gardasil vaccine to like the Virgin being thrown into the volcano, and sacrificed to the gods or whatever. Because it's around the same time frame. She's just coming into her having puberty and becoming sexual, and then they take her out, essentially. When she's about to become a woman, and so it just that I always kind of correlated that analogy. So when you brought that up, I thought that's a perfect way to describe it. Is just these religious sacrifices.
It's a religious sacrifice.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a ritual. It's a what did Joseph Campbell call him? You're crossing a threshold. It's a threshold marker. Birth, puberty, middle age, and late old age and death. We have a number of these large thresholds in our lives. Coming of age sexually, 13 to 18, somewhere in that period. 14, 15, I think, is probably the average. Certainly when I was feeling quite awake, 14, 15. Mm-hmm. And this is a point that people are very worried about us because we don't have stories about sex that make sense. We don't have limitations on sex that make sense to anybody because you can get rid of syphilis. It's difficult, but you can get rid of it. You can get rid of gonorrhea and chlamydia very easily. And pregnancy can be stopped with a pill or if you want, a little bit of surgery. So the idea of sex as the biological process that it was for 200,000 years is gone from us.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you think that this is sort of a way of kind of keeping these girls or these young people kind of chaste and not letting them come into their sexuality?
No, I think it's a vain attempt at that. It's like the Catholic Church in the 1500s was so corrupt that you could sin all that you wanted. And when you went to Rome, you could climb these steps, and you could pay to climb these steps and be absolved. And you paid what was called an indulgence. Mm-hmm. This is an indulgence. I mean, they'll kill a certain number of people, and they'll just sort of excuse, well, I got my HPV shot. I can fuck anybody I want,
Right, I see. Yeah, so if you have the money, you can sin all you want. As long as you pay for it.
As long as you pay for it, you can sin all you want. Which is the notion with HIV, because there's no test for it. There's no sexual problem. This is not an STD, by the way. STDs show up on your genitals. No offense to anybody out there who's so deluded as to not understand this, but if you get a rash from humping too much, you get it on your genitals. If you get crabs, you get them on your genitals. If you get syphilis, you get it on your genitals. If you leave it alone for a while, it becomes systemic, but you get it on your genitals. If you get chlamydia, you get it on your genitals. If you're a carrier of it and you don't have a bad case, you might not know, but your partner will. And if it's not a bad case, it doesn't kill you. It doesn't kill you in 10 years. It might just resolve. The natural, helpful bacteria in your body will just get rid of it. So this is a fiction. They managed to sell the American worldwide public on the idea that you could have an STD and not know it, but that one day, without knowing it, it would kill you and never show up. And that because of this mark, this scarlet letter, they made you a witch, they branded you with a scarlet letter, you had to now what? You had to wear the scarlet letter wherever you went and to take their drugs. And the drugs all kill you. It's not an exaggeration. All of the drugs used on AIDS patients kill AIDS patients. They're all black box drugs because all of the drugs have killed people already. So they put a black box saying this drug has killed you, just like chemotherapy drugs. They all kill people. That's what the drugs do. You get the fake plus on you, you go take the drugs that kill you, you die in 10 years or 5 years or 2 weeks. Like Keith Haring did, he took an AZT knockoff. Arthur died in a week. Arthur Ashe took AZT, died. Freddie Mercury, AZT, died. Ryan White, the 12-year-old who made us all think that everybody could get it, took AZT, he was a hemophiliac and died. AZT kills you quickly.
Right.
So the AIDS quilt, all that stuff in the 90s was all during the era of gram and a half, 1,500, 1,700 milligrams of AZT in a day. This stuff killed hundreds of thousands of gay men. They took AZT out of the market. The death rate went back down to what it was before AZT. Big surprise. They brought in another set of drugs, and they said the new drugs were responsible, but they brought in the drugs after the death rate already began to decline. And then those new drugs started to cause more problems, so it wasn't that. They kill people. Scientists lie, and they protect the petrochemical industry. If they didn't protect the petrochemical industry or the church, because the old natural philosophers protected the Catholic Church, and then they broke away, and we call that the Reformation or the scientific, revolution or whatever. They just went from protecting the church to protecting the oil, the energy maker.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember this story, like a year ago or so. There was this kid who they were saying in the news who recovered from HIV, came in and as a baby tested positive, and then came back years later and had actually reversed it. And the articles, everything in the news was sort of saying that science was getting closer to a cure, that they had found this way. But if you read the story, actually the mother had taken her away from the doctors and hid out for a few years and then came back and then the child tested negative.
Any child of somebody with antibodies will have the mother's antibodies, and then they resolve in 18 months to a couple of years, and everybody knows that. I mean, these tests should be illegal and a crime against humanity because they're fake. We're hitting the break.